White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt with an update on Operation Epic Fury as we enter now day 12 of the conflict with Iran. Watch.
More than 5,000 enemy targets have been struck so far. Iran's ballistic missile attacks are down more than 90%, and their drone attacks are down by approximately 85% since the start of Operation Epic Fury. The United States is also annihilating the Iranian regime's navy, and we have destroyed more than 50 Iranian naval vessels, including a major drone carrier ship. None of the regime's vessels are operating in major regional waterways, and the Iranian Navy has been assessed as combat ineffective. The operations will end when the commander-in-chief determines the military objectives have been met, fully realized, and that Iran is in a position of complete and unconditional surrender.
Iran and Hezbollah launched coordinated cluster bomb strikes on Israel overnight, marking a potential escalation in this widening regional conflict. CENTCOM has confirmed multiple Iranian naval vessels have been eliminated, including 16 mine layers in the Strait of Hormuz, where President Trump has warned Iran not to put out any mines. We're still waiting on details of the Pentagon's ask for the defense supplemental package I've been reporting about. I've reported it's about $50 billion that the Pentagon will be asking Congress for. It has already reportedly used over $5.5 billion worth of munitions in the first 2 days of Operation Epic Fury. Joining me now is Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick. He is a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he is the chairman of the Middle East Subcommittee. Senator, it's great to have you this morning. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And, of course, we have to mention your background. You served in the 82nd Airborne Division as a paratrooper. You were deployed to the Middle East during the first Gulf War. What is your reaction to this operation today?
Well, good morning. I think it's been a remarkable demonstration of the competence of our military, the incredible lethality of our military. And I think if you would have imagined on day one where we would be on day 11 or day 12, we would have hoped that we could be in a position where we essentially own the skies over Iran, where we've made huge gains on eliminating the missiles, the missile launchers, the Navy, the industrial capacity. So we're well on the way. We're not done yet, but we're well on the way to achieving the military objectives that President Trump had laid out. And I think our military has performed really masterfully in carrying out that mission. Yeah,
I mean, Caroline Leavitt just said the commander-in-chief will be done when we actually see the Iranians surrender fully. What, in your mind, would be victory and done with this? What else needs to be done to continue to degrade Iran?
Well, I think those objectives need to be achieved. In other words, we can't leave this operation with them having any vestiges of ability to reconstitute their missiles, to reconstitute a nuclear program. So now that we're in there, we need to finish the job and really eliminate both the existing capacity, but also the ability to rebuild that capacity. And the nuclear weapon and nuclear program, by the way, is a critical part of that. We made huge strides in eliminating that program in June. But we need to ensure that they can't restart it anytime in the future. And the president will make that judgment. In terms of what follows after that, listen, we will be a much safer country. Americans won't be being killed by terrorist proxies from Iran when that happens. And we hope to have a regime, and I expect we'll have a regime that's much more favorable to the West, that isn't staying, let's kill the great Satan. Yeah. But how that evolves is up in the air. We could have a brand new regime, or we could have a regime, the existing regime, with new leadership. Whatever it's going to be a much better situation than the first day of the operation.
Yeah, and the president was very clear about this, that, you know, along the way we will have disruptions. And I thought what Jack Keane, the general who joined me yesterday, made a great point in terms of all of this worry around oil prices, which have, of course, become one of the impacts of this war. Here's General Jack Keane with me yesterday. Watch this.
Oil prices have gone up. Heck, oil prices went up when Putin invaded Ukraine. It went up to $143, right, and it's sitting at $90 now. I mean, are we really saying that we cannot accept several weeks of oil prices maybe being higher than what they should be to take Iran off the map as a predator in the Middle East for decades to come? Is that what we're really saying? That we're so preoccupied with that we're not willing to make that kind of a sacrifice here? I think not. I mean, I think we've got to open our eyes, get a little clear-eyed about what is really happening here. And if we fall prey to walking away on this prematurely over oil prices, we've just given Iran a win.
Your thoughts, Senator?
Well, two things. America was scarred by 20 years of war in the Middle East, and so they're skeptical of foreign entanglements. The president's made clear that that's not going to be the case here. That we're going to accomplish the military objectives and then pull back. With regard to oil, listen, the oil prices spiked in 1990 when we invaded Iraq based on the first Gulf War.
Right.
The administration is taking huge steps. The IAEA voted yesterday for a huge release that will hopefully be approved on Wednesday. The insurance product that the administration has put in place. There's a number of things to mitigate oil prices, but the most important thing is to destroy the Iranian regime, and that may take a couple more weeks, as the general said. And then ultimately, we're going to have a much more stable oil markets. The Straits of Hormuz will be safe, and two of the biggest suppliers of oil in the world, Venezuela and Iran, are going to be much more favorably disposed to the West than they've ever been in decades. So I think in the end, when the dust settles, this is going to be a much more favorable environment for energy. It's going to take a little while to get there. And thank God America has energy dominance, and places like Pennsylvania are unlocked under the administration leadership of President Trump.
Yeah. Let me move on to some of the other issues that you're dealing with. The America's Bankers Association is now lobbying Congress to close a stablecoin yield loophole in the digital asset legislation. We know that the Genius Act was done very well, but it has a loophole in it that allows platforms of crypto to actually pay these rewards, while the Clarity Act is hung up in the Senate. Banks are arguing that this stablecoin rewards should not resemble any interest on bank savings accounts, because they're worried that the high rewards being paid from crypto platforms are going to cause people to move money out of traditional deposits at the major banks. As you know, this is the sticking point. And you know, you're still talking about this compromise negotiation underway. Where does this bill stand, Senator? And what do you want to say about crypto platforms paying rewards with the banks pushing back on that issue?
Well, it's really important that we get this framework finished and passed into law. The crypto and blockchain industry offers huge innovation and opportunity for America. And if we don't do this, it's going to move offshore. It's going to be a great driver of innovation. So we need to get this done. There appears to be agreement on activity-based rewards. The White House is negotiating, in the process of negotiating, what I hope will be a resolution of this. So there's definitional questions around what activities are constituted by this, but there's, I think, broad agreement on that. And I think and hope there'll be broad agreement that banks need to be able to take advantage of this huge step forward in innovation. And, I'm worried about community banks in Pennsylvania to make sure that they can still have deposits that they can lend to farmers and small businesses. But I think there's going to be a path through this, and there needs to be, because ultimately, if this is left in the hands of regulators in the next administration or some future administration, we may not have the certainty for investors that we need for this industry to really grow. Yeah, no, I understand that. I spoke with Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase, who's, lobbying to say, look, we should be able to pay rewards. But I thought that it was agreed upon by both sides that there would be no rewards paid. But it feels like there are some back doors here. Like, for example, if you're in a membership program, well, then the crypto players can pay a reward. And of course, is it in the crypto players' best interest to just delay? Because in the meanwhile, you've got that loophole in the Genius Act that's allowing them to pay rewards right now. Do you support getting rid of that loophole? I don't think there's any benefit in delay. In other words, I think getting an agreement now is what's going to be best for the industry and allow crypto and blockchain to grow and prosper, which I think is a national priority. In terms of activity-based rewards, I do think there's general agreement on activity-based rewards, and I think the final resolution will include that. And then the real question is how you treat storehold of wealth, whether it's in banks or the crypto exchanges, and that's I think one of the sticking points that the White House is helping to negotiate. So bottom line, when are you expecting the Clarity Act to move forward? Well, I think it's up in the air, honestly. I think we have to have resolution. We had hoped to have a final vote in January. And obviously, there's lots of other big things going on, like Iran and Save America and other things. So I don't think it's in the next week or two, but hopefully we'll get it done this spring, and it's really important that we do.
Well, the other thing going on is the SAVE Act. President Trump is urging Congress to pass this thing, restore funding to the Department of Homeland Security while you're at it, as more than 100,000 federal employees remain without pay for day 26. Now, Senate Majority Leader John Thune is planning to bring this bill to the floor, we understand, next week, but he's rejecting this use of a talking filibuster to force passage, saying that there are not enough votes to alter the rules. Senator, what's your take on this? Do you believe that this is ever going to get to President Trump's desk? I mean, the president says he's not going to sign any new bills into law until the Save America Act is on his desk.
This is so important. I mean, I feel this very personally. I won by 15,000 votes out of 7 million cast. Every vote has to count. Just in Pennsylvania last week, March 6th, a guy named Mahadi Sacco was arrested. He was an illegal immigrant who was supposed to be deported in 2000. He's been charged with voting 5 times as an illegal immigrant in presidential elections. So this is a real thing. More than half of America doesn't trust our voting systems. 80% support voter ID. So I'm a big proponent of this, co-sponsor of it. I think we've got to force the Democrats who are standing in the way of this to describe to their constituents why they're opposed to an 80-20 issue. So I think we've got to have a vote sooner rather than later. And I hope that's next week. And listen, I would be in favor of the talking filibuster as a way to force the Democrats to defend an unsustainable position.
Yeah.
I don't think we've got the votes on the Republican side for that, but I do think this is a critical issue for ensuring the confidence of voters. And it's not just Republicans. 80-20. Democrats and Republicans. Well, it's a big deal.
I'd love to know what your colleagues on the left think about this guy who voted 5 times.
Yeah, it's indefensible. This is not it. You cannot defend this.
I know.
And that's why I think it's so important to get the Democrats on the floor to say why they are standing in the way of something that's common sense and, by the way, something I campaigned on.
At least get them to explain their position. Nobody understands this. Senator, good to see you this morning. We're watching your work, as always, and we appreciate you. Dave McCormick joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.